The morning sun barely cut through the cold gray mist that clung to the military base in rural Virginia. Rows of barracks stretched along the gravel roads, their paint faded, their windows fogged from the early chill. It was the kind of place where dreams were forged in sweat, fear, and grit, where the military didn't just train soldiers, it tested their very souls. Captain Emily Carter stepped onto the parade ground, her boots crunching against the frost-hardened gravel. She straightened her uniform, the crisp lines of her jacket doing little to disguise the trembling in her stomach. Not from fear of the work ahead. She had spent years pushing herself harder than most. But from the whispers, the smirks, and the doubt that had followed her like a shadow since she arrived at the base. Emily had always been underestimated. Growing up in a small town in West Virginia, she had been the girl who fixed tractors alongside her father, who ran track with boys who laughed when she beat them, who dreamed of a life bigger than the hollows she had known. And now, at the elite military training program that accepted only the top 1% of recruits, she was the girl nobody thought would survive. From the moment she stepped off the bus, the resistance was palpable. Lieutenant Harris, a grizzled officer with decades of experience, barely hid his disbelief as he scanned her records. "You sure you're in the right place, Carter?" he had asked, smirking at the small stack of papers clutched in her hands. "This isn't some Girl Scout camp. We don't have time for—" He stopped himself, as if his words were too blunt even for the air between them. But the other recruits needed no prompting. Emily had arrived early, eager to prove herself, only to be met with sideways glances and whispered comments. "She's tiny," one of them said, nudging another. "Watch her fall flat on her face in the obstacle course." Emily felt it. Every doubt, every insult, every quiet dismissal. And yet she forced herself to hold her head high. She had a secret weapon, though she had no way of knowing how crucial it would become. Her file. Years of achievement, rigorous training and commendations, all meticulously documented, waiting for the moment it might finally speak louder than the sneers around her. The first day of training was a trial by fire. The recruits were marched through grueling obstacle courses, forced into physical endurance tests that pushed even the strongest to their limits. Emily ran alongside men who towered over her, men who laughed when she scrambled up ropes, men who pushed past her on the mud-filled tracks. But she didn't stumble. She didn't falter. "You'll break before lunch," one of the senior recruits muttered, sneering as she scaled a wall that had already bested half the class. But Emily didn't answer. She kept moving, her arms burning, her lungs screaming for air, her mind repeating the one phrase that had carried her through every challenge. "They haven't seen what I can do yet." By the end of the first week, the whispers hadn't stopped. They had only grown louder. "Why is she even here?" one trainee asked another during breakfast. "She can't possibly make it through the next round." Then came the moment that almost broke her, the final test of the first phase. Recruits were paired in duos for a simulated rescue mission, navigating treacherous terrain while carrying weights that mimicked injured comrades. Emily was paired with Corporal Dawson, a man who had already made his opinion clear. "Guess I get to babysit," he said, eyeing her with thinly veiled scorn. "Don't get in the way, Carter." But as they started the course, the undercurrent of doubt transformed into fuel. Emily moved with precision, memorizing every obstacle, calculating every step, adjusting her weight to maintain balance. When Dawson stumbled, exhausted and cursing under his breath, Emily was already beside him, steadying him, calling out the next move. "You're slowing us down," he snapped. But even he couldn't hide the grudging acknowledgement in his eyes as she guided him through a particularly tricky section of the course. By the time they reached the finish line, Emily was covered in mud, sweat dripping down her face, muscles trembling. But she had completed every obstacle. Dawson had fallen behind, exhausted and grumbling, while she stood upright, breathing hard but unbroken. Lieutenant Harris, watching from the sidelines, raised a skeptical brow. "Not bad," he muttered under his breath. Not enough to admit. He was impressed, but enough to hint at the beginning of change. But Emily's trials were far from over. The next morning, a meeting was called in the base's austere briefing room. Recruits lined the walls, all eyes on the imposing figure of Brigadier General Moore, a man whose reputation for toughness was legendary. Rumors had preceded him. No one could bluff their way past his scrutiny. No one could fake courage under pressure. As he scanned the room, his gaze settled on Emily. "Carter," he said, voice sharp. "Step forward." Her heart pounded. She had no idea what was coming. "Reports from your instructors suggest concerns about your suitability for this program." His eyes narrowed. "Explain why we should keep you here." The room went silent. Every eye was on her. The same eyes that had whispered, mocked, and doubted now waited for her to falter. Emily straightened. "Sir," she said, voice steady though her chest trembled, "I don't need to be the strongest recruit here. I don't need to be the fastest. But I can learn faster, endure longer, and lead with clarity when others cannot. My record proves it, sir. I only ask for the chance to show you that what I can do is worth more than what you think." For a long moment, there was only the sound of her own breathing. And then, the general's hand rested on a folder on his desk. Emily noticed the emblem on it, the official insignia of the Army personnel records. He opened it. He scanned. He raised an eyebrow. And in that brief, powerful moment, Emily saw something shift. A recognition of truth that even the harshest mockery could not overshadow. "You might be exactly what this program needs," he said finally. "We'll see if you can prove it." Until that moment, Emily had thought her fight was against her peers, against prejudice, against whispered doubts. But now she realized it was bigger. The real battle was about to begin, and this time the stakes were higher than she could have imagined. Because if she failed, she wouldn't just disappoint herself. She would prove every critic right. And if she succeeded, well, then the world would have to see her the way she had always known herself to be, unstoppable. The days after the meeting with General Moore were a whirlwind of grueling training and unrelenting scrutiny. Emily felt the weight of every eye on her. Not just the instructors, but her fellow recruits too. Some still whispered behind her back. Some openly questioned her capabilities, and some outright dared her to fail. Yet beneath it all, a fire had been lit inside her. A determination to prove that she belonged here, and to show the strength no one had expected. The training intensified with a ferocity that left even the most seasoned recruits gasping. Each day was a blur of obstacle courses, long runs in the cold rain, weapons drills, and survival exercises that pushed every ounce of physical endurance to the limit. Emily's small frame was often at a disadvantage. She felt the sting of exhaustion like a constant companion, yet she adapted. She ran faster when the terrain got tricky. She climbed higher when ropes burned her palms, and she learned to move with efficiency, turning her size into an advantage. It was during a particularly brutal exercise, a nighttime navigation drill across a dense wooded area, that Emily first truly felt the isolation of her position. The instructors had paired the recruits randomly, and Emily found herself alone, assigned to follow coordinates through thick underbrush and rocky streams. Her map reading skills were sharp, but she could hear the distant laughter of the other groups, their voices taunting her as if she were a child lost in the woods. And then, disaster struck. A misstep sent her ankle twisting painfully over a hidden root. Pain shot up her leg and she collapsed onto the damp earth, trying not to cry out. Her radio crackled, the instructor's voices distant and sharp. "Carter, status report." I twisted my ankle," she whispered, gritting her teeth against the pain. "I can continue. I'll keep moving. You're slowing the group." A voice snapped over the radio. "Do you want to be removed from the program?" Emily clenched her fists, feeling the familiar surge of defiance rise inside her. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Not now, not ever. With painstaking care, she got to her feet and began to limp forward. Each step a battle between her determination and the screaming pain in her ankle. Hours seemed to stretch into an eternity as she navigated the forest. Her muscles burned, her breathing was ragged, and her vision blurred from fatigue. At one point, she stumbled into a shallow stream, falling face first into the freezing water. But she forced herself up, shaking the water from her uniform and pressing onward, following the map as if her life depended on it. In a sense, it did, because if she failed here, she would reinforce every doubt her peers and instructors had about her. When she finally emerged from the trees, the first rays of dawn cutting through the fog, The other recruits were already clustered around the instructors. They had completed the exercise hours earlier, their faces relaxed and triumphant. Some glanced at her as she stumbled into view, her uniform soaked and muddy, her ankle swollen and bruised. A hush fell over the group. "Carter," one of the instructors barked. "What happened? You're late, way late." Emily lifted her chin, forcing herself to stand tall despite the pain. "I finished," she said simply. "I may have taken longer, but I followed the coordinates. I completed the mission." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then the group began to murmur, some in disbelief, some in grudging admiration. Lieutenant Harris, who had never been one to show emotion, allowed a small nod of acknowledgement. "Not bad," he muttered. "Not bad at all." It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The weeks that followed were a test of endurance, skill, and mental fortitude. Emily faced exercises designed to break the strongest recruits, long marches carrying heavy packs, simulated combat scenarios in freezing rain, early morning drills that demanded absolute precision. Through it all, she endured. Her peers continued to doubt her, mocking her during breaks, questioning her every move. Some called her names, others whispered about her in the barracks. But Emily learned to channel the ridicule into something stronger. Every insult became fuel, every skeptical glance a reminder that she had something to prove. She studied her instructor's methods, memorized tactics, and trained herself to anticipate problems before they arose. When a drill required leadership, she stepped up, often quietly, guiding her peers with calm precision while they struggled to keep pace. It wasn't just the physical challenges that tested her. Emily had to navigate the social minefield of the program. Recruits formed alliances, cliques, and unspoken hierarchies, and she was frequently excluded. Meals were eaten in tense silence, conversations were filled with subtle digs, and sleep in the barracks came with the constant awareness that every action, every misstep, could be used against her. Then came the exercise that would define her place in the program, the live-fire tactical simulation. Recruits were divided into squads and tasked with securing a mock enemy stronghold. The simulation required coordination, communication, and split-second decision-making under extreme pressure. Emily was assigned to a squad with some of the most skeptical peers, people who had openly expressed that she was not cut out for this program. The first minutes were chaos. Shouts filled the air, simulated gunfire echoed through the training grounds, and smoke machines blurred vision across the field. Her squad faltered immediately, unsure how to maneuver through the terrain. Emily's heart pounded, but she forced herself to assess the situation quickly. "Move to the left flank," she shouted, her voice cutting through the din. "Cover the approach. I'll take point." The others hesitated. Dawson, the same man who had mocked her weeks before, frowned. "Are you kidding?" he muttered. "No," Emily replied, her tone sharp and unwavering. "Do it now or we fail." To everyone's surprise, they listened. Emily led the squad through the simulation with calculated precision, anticipating obstacles, positioning her teammates where they were strongest, and improvising when things went wrong. By the end of the exercise, they had secured the target with one of the fastest completion times in the unit's history. Her squad members were stunned into silence. For once, the whispers of doubt were replaced with something new: respect. Dawson looked at her, eyes wide, and muttered, You actually did it." Emily allowed herself a small, fleeting smile, but she didn't celebrate. She knew this was just the beginning. The program was relentless, and for every victory, a greater challenge awaited. Yet for the first time, she felt a shift, a recognition that perhaps finally, people were beginning to see her the way she had always known herself: capable, strong, and unbreakable. And just as she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, the general called another meeting. Emily sensed it before she entered the room, a tension that wasn't there before. This time, it wasn't just about proving her strength in training. Something more serious, more consequential, was about to unfold, because even as she earned respect, the true test of her courage was waiting, a challenge that would push her beyond endurance, beyond skill, beyond every expectation anyone had of her. And for Emily Carter, it was a moment that would define not just her career, but her legacy. The sun barely broke the horizon when Emily Carter was woken by the sharp bark of orders echoing through the barracks. Today was no ordinary training day. Today, the instructors had announced the recruits would face the ultimate field exercise, a multi-day live simulation designed to mimic real combat, complete with hostile forces, limited supplies, and constant unpredictability. Emily felt the familiar pang of anxiety twist in her stomach. She had trained for this, studied for it, and endured every insult and doubt thrown her way. But she knew instinctively that this exercise would push every limit she had ever known. Yet underneath the anxiety there was a simmering resolve. She had come too far to be thrown out now. The briefing room was thick with tension as Brigadier General Moore addressed the recruits. "This exercise is not a game," he said, voice low and unwavering. "Every decision you make could mean the difference between mission success and failure. You will be pushed to exhaustion. You will be tested in ways you cannot predict. Only those who demonstrate exceptional skill, courage, and leadership will succeed." Emily's heart raced as she scanned the room. She could see the usual skepticism in her peers' eyes, but there were also glimpses of respect. Hesitant, cautious, but real. She remembered Dawson's wide-eyed look after the last simulation. Maybe, just maybe, some of them were beginning to see her as more than the small recruit who shouldn't be here. The simulation began at first light. Recruits were dropped into a sprawling wooded training area, equipped only with basic supplies and a radio for minimal communication. The goal was to infiltrate an enemy-held position and extract a mock hostage without being killed by opposing forces, simulated by other highly trained recruits acting as enemy combatants. Emily's squad moved quickly, but within the first hour, disaster struck. A sudden ambush by the opposing team left half of her group pinned down behind fallen logs, their radios jammed by interference. Bullets, simulated but terrifyingly loud, whizzed past her as she assessed the situation. Dawson froze, terror in his eyes. I can't move," he stammered. Emily didn't hesitate. "You can," she said firmly, gripping his arm. "We move together. Trust me." The next hour was a blur of strategy and split-second decision-making. Emily led her squad through the trees, signaling silently, ducking behind cover, and coordinating movements with precision that stunned even the instructors observing from the perimeter. But the challenge wasn't just physical. Halfway through, she discovered that one of the hostages had been injured more seriously than expected. The simulation protocols required a risky rescue under heavy fire. She glanced at the squad, many of whom looked at her with doubt, expecting her to falter. But Emily felt no hesitation. "I'll go first," she said, voice calm but commanding. "Cover me. We get them out safely, or we fail as a team." Navigating through gunfire and obstacles, she reached the hostage. The weight was considerable and the terrain unforgiving. Every step sent searing pain through her already fatigued muscles. One misstep could mean disaster, and yet she kept going, summoning reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. The squad followed her lead, inspired by her courage even as the danger intensified. One by one, they moved under her guidance, covering each other, improvising when obstacles appeared. Emily felt a surge of pride, but also a deep exhaustion. She had to keep her mind razor-sharp, her body moving despite the tremors threatening to take over. By nightfall, they reached the extraction point, only to find it under heavy enemy control. The instructors, watching from a distance, noted Emily's squad's hesitation, but it was she who spoke first. "We can flank from the east," she said, pointing at the rugged terrain leading up to a small ridge. "It's risky, but it's our best shot. We move quietly, we stay low, and we trust each other. We finish this together." Her squad followed, inspired and terrified in equal measure. The climb was grueling, mud sucking at boots, branches scraping exposed skin, and every shadow a potential threat. Halfway up the ridge, Emily slipped, landing hard on her shoulder. Pain flared sharply, but she forced herself to rise, her teeth clenched, refusing to give in. The enemy's fire intensified. Dawson nearly panicked again, but Emily's steady hand and calm voice guided him through. Step by step, inch by inch, they reached the top. And then, in a move that none of the instructors had predicted, Emily devised a diversion that drew the opposing team away from the extraction zone. It was risky. One wrong move could have meant virtual death. But it worked flawlessly. The squad secured the hostage and made it to the extraction point just as the simulation ended. Exhausted, mud-caked, and battered, they had achieved one of the most successful completions in the program's history. As they stumbled into the debriefing area, Emily expected relief, maybe even a pat on the back. Instead, General Moore approached her directly, holding a folder she hadn't seen before. The room went silent, every recruit watching, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Carter," he said, voice steady, eyes locked onto hers. "You've demonstrated something exceptional. Not just physical skill, not just endurance, but leadership, courage, and composure under pressure. There is a reason you're here, a reason some doubted you, but you've proven them wrong. And now," he opened the folder, sliding it across the table. Inside were pages she had never imagined would be seen by anyone at the base. Her early military records, letters of commendation, awards for heroism during training missions, even citations from deployments overseas. Emily's heart skipped. "Sir," she began, but Moore raised a hand, silencing her. "These files," he said, "explain why you're not just capable, you're extraordinary, and anyone who doubted you, they were judging without knowing the truth. Today you've earned not just your place in this program, but the respect of every person in this room, including those who thought you would fail." The squad around her exchanged stunned looks, realization dawning. Dawson's eyes met hers, filled with admiration and apology. The whispers of doubt that had shadowed her for weeks evaporated, replaced with awe and recognition. Emily's body ached, every muscle screaming, but she stood taller than she had in days. The journey had been brutal. The mockery, the doubt, the physical and mental torment, it had all led to this moment. And yet deep inside, Emily knew this was not the end. The program, the military, life itself, none of it would ever be easy. But she had faced what seemed impossible and emerged victorious. She had turned every whisper, every doubt into proof of her strength. Until now, the world had underestimated her. But from this moment forward, there could be no question. Emily Carter was not just a soldier. She was a leader, a hero, and anyone who tried to throw her out again would discover the truth too late. The morning air at the military base was unusually crisp, almost electric as Emily Carter stepped onto the parade ground. For weeks, she had endured grueling training, physical exhaustion, and the silent judgment of her peers. Now, she was about to face the final evaluation, the culmination of everything she had fought for since arriving. Every ounce of strength, skill, and courage she had mustered would be tested one last time. The instructors assembled the recruits in the large, gray-bricked drill hall. Their expressions were serious, almost solemn. Emily could sense that this final test was different. It wasn't just about endurance or combat simulation. This was a measure of character, resilience, and the ability to inspire others. Brigadier General Moore stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. The whispers and mockery that had followed Emily since her first day were gone, replaced by a charged silence. The general's eyes locked on hers, steady and unyielding. "Recruits," he said, "today marks the end of your program. Some of you will graduate, some will not. And one of you has already shown extraordinary courage and leadership. Someone who has turned doubt into determination, adversity into strength, and mockery into proof of what real resilience looks like." Emily's heart raced. She had faced countless obstacles, both physical and emotional, but she never expected the general to single her out in front of the entire unit. She straightened her back, willing herself to remain calm as every recruit turned to watch. "Carter," he continued, "step forward." She did, her boots clicking against the polished floor. Every whisper, every doubt, every cruel remark from the past weeks flashed through her mind. The words of her peers, the cold stares from the instructors, even the small voice in her own head that occasionally doubted, she let it all fuel her. Resolved, the general opened a thick folder, the same one from the live fire exercise, and spread its contents on the lectern before her. Emily's records, commendations, and past achievements had been reviewed again. But this time it wasn't just a private acknowledgement. This was public validation, an official recognition of her capabilities. "These documents," Moore said, his voice ringing with authority, "show that Emily Carter is not only qualified to be here, but that she exemplifies the highest standards of courage, intelligence, and leadership. She has overcome doubt, physical trials, and prejudice to earn the respect of everyone in this program." A murmur ran through the recruits. Some faces that had once sneered at her now looked awed. Dawson, the man who had mocked her early on, stepped forward hesitantly, a mixture of respect and apology in his eyes. I underestimated you," he admitted quietly. "I'm sorry, Carter. You've shown us all what it means to lead. Emily nodded, acknowledging him without a word. Her victory wasn't about apology. It was about proving her worth, her skill, and her integrity. The general gestured for her to continue. You've faced every challenge we could throw at you. You've endured every insult and disbelief, and yet you stand here unbroken. Today we honor not just your accomplishments, but your spirit. Recruits, let this be a lesson. Never judge someone by appearances, rumors, or assumptions. Only courage, dedication, and heart reveal true strength. The recruits erupted into applause, a wave of recognition washing over Emily. It was the moment she had dreamed of, not for personal glory, but for validation, for the right to stand as an equal among those who had doubted her. She had been mocked, underestimated, and even targeted for removal from the program, but she had turned every obstacle into a testament of her resilience. And then came the final, unexpected twist. The general closed the folder and fixed his gaze on Emily. There is one more responsibility, he said, his tone measured. Given your leadership, determination, and performance, you are being assigned to mentor the next group of recruits. Those who may doubt themselves as you were doubted. You will teach them not just tactics and endurance, but what it truly means to persevere against all odds. Emily felt a lump in her throat. It was more than recognition. It was trust. It was the chance to turn her own journey into inspiration for others, to transform mockery and doubt into guidance and empowerment. She looked out at the recruits, at the group who had once whispered behind her back, at the ones who had doubted her in every obstacle, and she realized something profound. The battle she had fought wasn't just against external challenges. It had been against perception, prejudice, and the limits others tried to impose on her. And now she had won. Tears threatened her eyes, but she blinked them back, a smile spreading across her face. She had endured, she had triumphed, and she had transformed disbelief into undeniable proof of her strength. From that day forward, Emily Carter was no longer just a recruit at the military base. She was a symbol of courage, a testament to the power of perseverance, and a reminder that the fiercest battles are often those fought in silence, against doubt and prejudice, and somewhere deep inside, she knew that every challenge, every insult, every moment of exhaustion had been worth it. Because in the end, she had not only proven her own worth, she had changed the way everyone around her saw what was possible. Emily walked from the hall that day, not just victorious, but transformed. The small-town girl who had been underestimated, mocked, and almost thrown out of the program had become a leader, a hero, and a living lesson in resilience. And the world finally had no choice but to see her as she always knew she was, unstoppable.